Maya Johnson wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Far from it. Growing up in a small apartment on the east side of town, she learned early on that nothing in life would be handed to her. Her mom worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and her dad had left when she was just 5 years old. But there was one thing Maya's mother always insisted on: education came first. Every night, no matter how tired she was after her shifts at the hospital and the local diner, Maya's mom would sit with her at their tiny kitchen table, helping with homework and telling her, "Your brain is your ticket out of here, baby girl." Maya took those words to heart. While other kids played after school, she studied. When her high school friends went to parties, she worked part-time at an auto repair shop, fascinated by engines and the business of cars. The owner, Mr. Thompson, noticed her interest and took her under his wing, teaching her everything from changing oil to negotiating with parts suppliers. "You know," he told her one day as they closed up shop, "you've got a good head for business. Better than most adults I know." Those words stuck with her through college, where she worked 3 jobs to pay tuition. Through business school, where she was often the only black woman in her classes. Through her first job at a prestigious consulting firm, where clients sometimes mistook her for the assistant rather than the lead consultant. By 30, Maya had saved enough to take a risk. She found a struggling car dealership on the verge of bankruptcy and convinced a bank to give her a loan, after being rejected by 7 others. The loan officer who finally said yes later admitted he'd been impressed by her detailed business plan and her stubborn refusal to give up after so many rejections. Prestige Motors was born, and Maya had a vision bigger than just selling cars. She wanted to create an experience, one where everyone was treated with respect regardless of what they wore or what they looked like. The first year was brutal. Maya worked 18-hour days, sometimes sleeping on the small couch in her office. When a customer tried to return a car claiming it had problems that didn't exist, she stayed up all night reviewing the paperwork and found a clause that protected her business. When her first sales manager quit without notice, she stepped in herself, closing more deals in a month than he had in 3. By year 3, Prestige Motors was turning a profit. By year 5, Maya opened a second location. Now, at 38, she oversaw 15 showrooms across the country, employed over 200 people, and had been featured in business magazines as a rising star in the automotive world. But success came with its own challenges. As her company grew, Maya couldn't be everywhere at once. She started hearing whispers about problems at her newest location, customers complaining about inconsistent service, staff tensions, sales numbers that didn't match the foot traffic. "You need to send in someone to check it out," her operations manager suggested during their weekly meeting. Someone they won't recognize. Maya tapped her pen against her desk, thinking. She had hired a secret shopper service before, but something about this situation felt different. The flagship store was supposed to be their crown jewel, the physical embodiment of everything she'd built. "I'll go myself," she decided suddenly. Her assistant looked up in surprise. "You? But everyone knows who you are." Maya smiled, touching her straightened hair that she wore for business meetings and public appearances. "Not everyone. Most of the new hires at that location have never met me in person, and they certainly haven't seen me like this." That Friday night, Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror and let her hair return to its natural curls for the first time in months. She swapped her designer suit for jeans and a simple sweater. Without the makeup, without the power clothes, without the context of her corner office, she looked like an ordinary woman, just another customer walking through the doors of a high-end car showroom. She had no idea that what would happen the next day would not only change her company forever, but would send ripples through an entire industry. Saturday morning came with a bright sun and clear skies. Maya woke up earlier than usual, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness in her stomach. This wasn't just another workday. Today, she wouldn't be the boss everyone respected, or at least pretended to. Today, she would just be another face walking through the door of her own business. "You sure about this?" Her friend Tanya asked over the phone while Maya got ready. "You could just hire someone to do this checkup for you." "I need to see it with my own eyes," Maya replied, pulling on worn jeans and a plain blue sweater. "Something doesn't feel right about the reports I'm getting. Numbers are down, but more than that, the spirit of what I built seems missing." She looked at herself in the mirror. Without her usual business attire and with her hair in its natural curls instead of the straightened style she wore for meetings, she barely recognized herself. The transformation was completed with a pair of simple sneakers instead of her usual heels. "Perfect," she whispered. "No one will know." Maya drove her personal car instead of the company vehicle she usually used, an older model sedan, rather than the luxury cars her dealership sold. As she pulled into the customer parking lot of her flagship showroom, she felt a strange flutter in her chest. The huge glass building gleamed in the morning light, the Prestige Motors sign standing tall and proud above the entrance. "I built this," she reminded herself, feeling a small spark of pride as she watched customers coming and going through the wide glass doors. Every brick, every policy, every car on that lot. Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped out of her car and headed toward the entrance. She noticed how different it felt approaching as a customer rather than the CEO. The building somehow seemed bigger, more imposing. She remembered designing it that way, wanting to create a sense of luxury and exclusivity. Now she wondered if that same design made some people feel unwelcome. Inside, the showroom was buzzing with weekend activity. Salespeople moved between shiny vehicles and interested customers. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the waiting area. Classical music played softly in the background, all details Maya had personally chosen to create the perfect atmosphere. She stood just inside the entrance for nearly 2 minutes, observing. No one approached her. A white couple walked in behind her and was immediately greeted by a smiling sales associate. Interesting, Maya thought, moving deeper into the showroom. She stopped beside a brand new luxury sedan, one of their most expensive models. The car was stunning, sleek black with chrome details that caught the light. Maya ran her hand along the hood, remembering the excitement she'd felt when this model was first announced. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind her, slightly impatient, as if the question was being asked for the second time. Maya turned to see a young man in a perfectly pressed suit. His name tag read Brad. He was new, she didn't recognize him from her visits to this location. "Yes, I'm interested in this model," she said with a smile. Brad's eyes quickly scanned her, taking in her casual clothes, her natural hair, her lack of visible designer labels. Something in his expression shifted. "This particular vehicle starts at $87,000, he said, emphasizing the price. The monthly payments would be quite substantial. Maya nodded. "I understand. Could you tell me more about its features?" Brad glanced over his shoulder, where another customer, a man in an expensive suit, was examining a sports car. "You know," Brad said, lowering his voice as if doing her a favor, "we have some more accessible options over in that section." He pointed toward the pre-owned vehicle area. "Something that might better suit your budget." Maya felt a small knot form in her throat. She'd specifically written and implemented training policies against making assumptions about customers based on appearance. Yet here it was, happening in her own showroom. "Actually," she said calmly, "I'm very interested in this specific model. I'd like to see the pricing sheet and financing options." Brad's smile tightened. "Of course. Why don't you wait here, and I'll go grab that information for you." Maya watched as he walked away, noticing how he immediately approached the man in the suit, engaging him in animated conversation without retrieving any materials for her. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Brad was now taking the man on a test drive, having completely forgotten about Maya. Or perhaps, she thought with a sinking feeling, he hadn't forgotten at all. She decided to wait and see what would happen next. After all, this was exactly why she'd come today, to experience her business through different eyes. So far, she didn't like what she was seeing. 20 minutes had passed, and Maya still stood alone by the luxury sedan. The showroom bustled around her, but somehow she remained invisible. She watched as other customers, mostly white, mostly well-dressed, were greeted warmly, offered coffee, and given immediate attention. This can't be happening, she thought, a mix of anger and disbelief rising in her chest. Not in her showroom. Not in the business she had built from nothing. Not with the policies she had personally written and the trainings she had insisted upon. Maya decided to try another approach. She moved toward the reception desk where a young woman was answering phones. "Excuse me," Maya said politely. "I've been waiting to get information about that black sedan, but the salesperson seems to have forgotten about me." The receptionist glanced up, then looked around the showroom. "Oh, you were working with Brad? He's probably just busy with another customer. Saturday is our busiest day." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Someone will be with you when they can." The phone rang again, and just like that, Maya was dismissed. She returned to the showroom floor, a strange feeling washing over her. In her regular life, people jumped when she walked into a room. Doors were held open. Calls were returned immediately. But strip away the title, the designer clothes, the straightened hair that conformed to white beauty standards, and this was what remained: invisibility. Maya decided to press further. She approached another salesperson who was arranging brochures on a display stand. "Hello," she said. "I'm interested in the new performance package for the GT model. Could you tell me more about it?" The man, his name tag read Greg, looked up and gave her a quick once-over. "That's our sports line. Very powerful engines, very expensive." "I understand," Maya nodded. "I'm particularly interested in the acceleration specs compared to last year's model." Greg seemed surprised by her knowledge. He hesitated. "Let me find someone who specializes in those models." But instead of finding another salesperson, Greg simply walked away and began chatting with a colleague near the coffee station, occasionally glancing in her direction. Maya felt her face growing warm. This was beyond poor service. This was something else entirely. Just then, Brad returned from the test drive with the man in the expensive suit. They were laughing like old friends. The customer hadn't purchased yet. Maya could tell from the body language, but Brad was treating him like he'd already made the sale. Maya approached them directly. "Excuse me," she said to Brad. "I'm still waiting for that information you promised to get for me." Brad's smile faltered. "Right, sorry about that. Things got busy." He turned to the man beside him. "If you'll excuse me for just a moment, Mr. Chen." "Take your time," the man replied. "I'll look around a bit more." Brad reluctantly turned his attention to Maya, his demeanor completely different from how he'd been with Mr. Chen. "Look," he said in a lowered voice, "I'm going to be straight with you. These cars are very expensive. The monthly payments alone would be more than—" He paused, eyeing her simple clothes. "Well, let's just say they're substantial. I don't want to waste your time or mine showing you something that's out of reach." Maya felt her heart pounding. In that moment, she wanted nothing more than to reveal her identity, to watch his face crumble when he realized his mistake. But she held back. There was more to learn here. "How do you know what I can or cannot afford?" she asked calmly. Brad laughed, actually laughed, and shook his head. "I've been selling luxury cars for 7 years. You develop a sense for these things." "A sense," Maya repeated, keeping her voice level despite the anger boiling inside. "And what exactly gives you that sense about me?" Brad shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware he might have crossed a line. "It's not personal. It's just experience." "Would you mind if I speak to your manager?" Maya asked. The smile dropped completely from Brad's face. "Is there a problem?" "I'd just like to speak with them." Brad's jaw tightened. "Fine. Wait here." As he walked away, Maya noticed several other staff members watching the exchange. None approached to help. None seemed concerned about a customer being treated poorly. In fact, a few exchanged knowing glances, as if this was a familiar scene. In that moment, Maya realized the problem at this location went deeper than one rude salesperson. Something had infected the culture of her flagship store, the very heart of what she'd built. And she was going to find out exactly what it was. Brad returned 5 minutes later with an older man in tow. The man wore an expensive suit and a name tag that read Robert Wilson, Sales Manager. Maya recognized him immediately. She had personally hired him 3 years ago. "I understand there's some kind of issue," Robert asked, his tone professional but cool. He didn't recognize Maya either. "Yes," Maya said calmly. "I've been in your showroom for nearly 45 minutes. I've expressed interest in your high-end models, and I've been repeatedly ignored, dismissed, and talked down to." Robert glanced at Brad, then back at Maya. "I apologize if there's been a misunderstanding. Saturday is our busiest day, and sometimes customers have to wait a bit longer than we'd like. Is that why the gentleman who came in after me has already been on a test drive? Or why 3 other customers who arrived after me are currently being helped?" Maya gestured around the showroom. Robert's smile tightened. Different customers have different needs. Our sales team makes judgment calls about who looks like they can afford your cars. Maya finished for him. About who deserves attention based on their appearance. Brad shifted uncomfortably. Robert's professional demeanor slipped just slightly. Ma'am, I don't appreciate what you're implying. We treat all our customers with respect. Do you? Maya asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Because I've been recording my time here today. Would you like to review the footage with me? This wasn't entirely true. She hadn't been recording, but the bluff worked. Robert's face paled slightly. That won't be necessary, he said quickly. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Brad here will be happy to show you any car you're interested in, and we can offer you our VIP customer discount as an apology for any misunderstanding. Maya shook her head. I don't want special treatment. I want to know how your staff is trained to interact with customers who look like me. Look, I don't know what you're getting at, but… May I see your business card, please? Maya interrupted. Robert hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a card. If you have a formal complaint, you can contact our customer service department. The number is on our website. Maya took the card and looked at it for a long moment. Then she reached back into her purse and pulled out her own business card, the one that read, Maya Johnson, CEO, Prestige Motors. She handed it to Robert. For a moment, nothing happened. Robert glanced down at the card, then back up at Maya's face, then down at the card again. His expression changed from confusion to shock to horror in the span of seconds. Ms. Johnson, he stammered, his voice suddenly an octave higher. I didn't. Brad looked confused. What's happening? Robert turned to him, his face ashen. Brad, this is Maya Johnson. She's the CEO and owner of Prestige Motors. All of Prestige Motors, including this showroom. The color drained from Brad's face. Around them, conversations had stopped as other staff members began to realize what was happening. The showroom fell into an unnatural silence. Ms. Johnson, Brad began, I had no idea. Maya held up her hand. Clearly, she looked around at the now frozen staff. I didn't come here today expecting royal treatment. I came as a regular customer to experience what our clients experience. And what I found was deeply disappointing. Robert was shaking slightly. Ms. Johnson, I can explain. I'm sure you can, Maya cut him off. And you'll have that opportunity. I'll be in my office Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. I expect both of you there. She looked from Robert to Brad, holding their gazes until they both nodded. Should we prepare anything specific for the meeting? Robert asked, his voice unnaturally high. Maya considered this. Yes. I want you to prepare an honest explanation of what happened here today. Not excuses, an explanation. I want to understand how the culture in this showroom has become something so far removed from the company I built. With that, Maya turned and walked toward the exit. She could feel every eye in the place following her. The same people who had found her invisible moments ago couldn't look away now. As she pushed open the glass doors and stepped into the sunlight, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, resolve. The drive home would give her time to think about what she'd do next. Because one thing was certain, what had happened today couldn't be allowed to continue. Monday morning arrived with dark clouds threatening rain, fitting for the mood inside Prestige Motors headquarters. By 7:30 a.m., the story of what had happened on Saturday had spread through the company like wildfire. Staff whispered in corners, wondering what would happen to Brad and Robert. She's going to fire them both, one receptionist told the accounting team during their morning coffee. Wouldn't you if someone treated you that way in your own business? Inside her office, Maya sat alone, reviewing company policies on her computer. The ones she had written herself. The ones that clearly stated all customers deserved equal treatment regardless of appearance, race, gender, or any other factor. The policies that had obviously been ignored. At exactly 8 a.m., her assistant knocked on the door. They're here, she said quietly. Maya nodded. Give me 2 minutes, then send them in. When Brad and Robert entered, they looked like men headed to their own funerals. Robert's usual confidence had vanished. Brad's hands trembled slightly as he closed the door behind them. Sit down, Maya said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. They sat in silence for a long moment. Maya studied them, letting the tension build. Robert couldn't meet her eyes. Brad looked like he might be sick. "I spent all weekend thinking about what happened," Maya finally said. "Thinking about what I should do." Robert cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, before you say anything, I want to take full responsibility. As the manager, the showroom culture is my responsibility, and I've clearly failed." Maya held up her hand, stopping him. "I've read your personnel files. Brad, you've been with us for 8 months. Your sales numbers are impressive. Robert, you've managed that location for 3 years with consistently strong results." She paused. "By traditional metrics, you're both valuable employees." Brad and Robert exchanged confused glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. "I imagine you both thought I called you here to fire you," Maya continued. "You're not." Brad blurted out, then immediately looked like he regretted speaking. Maya leaned forward. "Here's what I believe. I believe people can make mistakes, even terrible ones, and learn from them. I believe that firing you would be easy, but it wouldn't solve the bigger problem." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain that had started to fall. "I didn't build this company to be just another car dealership. I built it because I believe everyone deserves respect when making a major purchase. I built it because I was tired of walking into showrooms and being ignored or talked down to because of how I look." She turned back to face them. "What happened Saturday showed me we have a serious problem. Not just with you two, but with our company culture, and we're going to fix it." Robert swallowed hard. "How?" "I'm announcing a new company initiative today. We're calling it Prestige Perspectives. It's a comprehensive training program addressing bias in customer service with a special focus on the automotive industry's problems with race and gender." Brad looked confused. "And we'll need to take this training." Maya smiled, but there was a steely determination behind it. "No, Brad. You're going to help develop it. Both of you are." Their shocked expressions almost made Maya laugh, despite the seriousness of the situation. "You'll work with our HR team to create training modules based on real experiences, including what happened Saturday. You'll help implement the program across all 15 locations. And you, Brad, will be sharing your personal learning journey as part of the training. You want me to tell everyone how I treated you?" Brad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Maya said simply. "Because this isn't about punishing you. It's about creating real change. It's about making sure no customer ever has the experience I had in our showroom again." She sat back down at her desk. "This isn't the easy path for any of us. Firing you would make a statement, but hiring new people wouldn't fix the underlying issues. I'm choosing to believe you can be part of the solution." The tension in the room shifted to something else, something like cautious hope. "You have a choice to make," Maya continued. "You can resign now if you prefer, or you can be part of building something better. What's it going to be?" Robert and Brad looked at each other, then back at Maya. "I'm in," Robert said quietly. After a moment's hesitation, Brad nodded. "Me too." Outside, the rain began to ease, and a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Prestige Motors had ever experienced. Word spread quickly about what had happened and about Maya's unexpected response. Some employees thought she was crazy to keep Brad and Robert on staff. Others admired her approach. Everyone was talking. For Brad, the journey wasn't easy. The first day he walked into the HR department to start working on the training program, he felt eyes following him everywhere. "They all hate me," he whispered to Robert as they waited in a conference room. "They don't hate you," Robert replied. "They're just wondering if you deserve this second chance." When the HR director arrived with her team, Brad expected coldness. Instead, she smiled and handed him a thick folder. "These are customer complaints from the past 2 years," she explained. "Specifically ones where customers felt ignored or disrespected based on how they looked. I think you should read them." Brad opened the folder and felt his stomach sink. There were dozens of complaints, many describing experiences just like Maya's. "I didn't realize," he began, but couldn't finish the sentence. "That's the point," the HR director said gently. "None of us fully realize the impact of our actions until we see the pattern." For 3 weeks, Brad and Robert worked alongside the HR team, developing training modules based on real experiences. They interviewed customers who had faced discrimination. They studied research on unconscious bias. And most difficult of all, Brad recorded a video sharing his side of what had happened with Maya. I thought I was just being efficient, he admitted in the recording. I told myself I was focusing on customers who were more likely to buy. But the truth is, I was making assumptions based on how people looked. I was wrong, and I'm learning why. Meanwhile, Maya wasn't sitting on the sidelines. She visited each of her 15 showrooms personally, spending a day at each location observing how customers were treated. She spoke with staff at all levels, asking tough questions about company culture. What I found, she told her executive team one evening, is that what happened to me wasn't just one bad apple. We have a system-wide problem, but we also have people everywhere who want to do better. By the third month, the Prestige Perspectives program was ready to launch. Maya gathered her entire company, all 200-plus employees, for a virtual meeting. She shared her experience going undercover and explained the new initiative. This isn't just about avoiding discrimination, she said. It's about creating a truly welcoming environment for everyone who walks through our doors. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, regardless of what they look like or what they're wearing. Then Brad stepped forward to share his story. The virtual meeting was silent as he spoke. No typing, no shuffling papers, no whispered side conversations. Everyone was listening. I've always thought of myself as a good person, he said, his voice steady but humble. It was hard to accept that good people can still do harmful things without realizing it. But working on this program has opened my eyes. I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago. The training program rolled out across all Prestige locations. Every employee, from receptionists to sales staff to mechanics to executives, completed the modules. They participated in role-playing exercises where they experienced what it felt like to be ignored or dismissed. They learned to recognize their own biases and how to ensure every customer received equal treatment. For Brad, the transformation was remarkable. He went from being the poster child for what not to do to becoming one of the program's most passionate advocates. When a new hire made assumptions about a customer based on appearance, Brad would pull them aside for a quiet conversation. "I've been where you are," he'd say. "Let me tell you what I learned." 6 months after the fateful Saturday when Maya walked into her own showroom and was ignored, she visited the flagship store again. This time she came as herself, CEO Maya Johnson, in a designer suit with her hair straightened. But something was different. The showroom felt more alive, more welcoming. Staff members were engaging with all customers, regardless of how they were dressed or what they looked like. There was a warmth that hadn't been there before. As Maya watched, she saw Brad greet an elderly woman in worn clothes who had walked in just to escape the heat. Instead of dismissing her, he offered her water and engaged her in friendly conversation. "It's working," Maya thought to herself with a smile. "It's really working." 1 year after Maya's undercover experience, Prestige Motors was a different company. Customer satisfaction scores had skyrocketed across all 15 locations. Sales were up by 23%. Employee turnover had dropped to its lowest point in company history. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real change was in how it felt to walk into a Prestige showroom. Every customer was greeted with the same warm welcome, whether they arrived in designer clothes or worn jeans. Sales staff took time to understand what each person needed rather than making snap judgments. The entire atmosphere had shifted from exclusive to inclusive, without losing any of the luxury appeal that made the brand special. Word began to spread. A popular car magazine sent a reporter to investigate the rumors about Prestige Motors' transformation. The reporter went undercover, sending people of different races, ages, and apparent income levels into various luxury car dealerships, including Prestige. When the article was published with the title "The Most Welcoming Luxury Car Buying Experience in America," it sent shockwaves through the industry. The article detailed how Prestige outperformed every competitor in treating all customers equally. It mentioned the Prestige Perspectives program, but didn't know the full story behind it. That changed when the magazine reached out for an interview with Maya. At first, she hesitated. "Do we want to share what happened?" she asked her team during a meeting. "It doesn't paint us in the best light." "It's exactly what we should share," Robert said. He had been promoted to Director of Customer Experience, overseeing the training program across all locations. It shows we're honest about our mistakes and committed to doing better. The interview was scheduled at the flagship showroom. The journalist arrived expecting to meet only with Maya, but was surprised to find Brad there too. "I thought it was important for you to hear from both of us," Maya explained. "This story belongs to Brad as much as to me." As they shared what had happened that Saturday morning 1 year ago, the journalist scribbled notes furiously. When Brad described how he treated Maya and the journey he'd been on since then, the journalist looked up. "You're still working here, even after how you treated the CEO?" Brad nodded. "Ms. Johnson could have fired me on the spot. Most people would have. Instead, she saw an opportunity to create real change. She believed people could learn and grow, including me." The article that followed made waves far beyond the automotive industry. Business schools began using Prestige Motors as a case study in effective leadership and organizational change. Other companies reached out, asking if Maya would share her training program with them. That summer, Maya was invited to deliver the keynote address at the National Automotive Dealers Convention, the biggest industry event of the year. As she stood at the podium looking out at a sea of faces, she felt a mixture of pride and humility. "A little over a year ago," she began, "I walked into my own showroom and was ignored because of how I looked. It was painful and humiliating. But it also opened my eyes to problems I hadn't fully addressed in my own company." She paused, scanning the audience. "I could stand here today and tell you that bias doesn't exist in our industry anymore. I could pretend that we've solved all our problems at Prestige Motors, but that wouldn't be true. What I can tell you is that we're committed to doing better every single day." Near the front of the room, Brad sat watching. At Maya's invitation, he would be leading a workshop later that day on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias in sales environments. "The true measure of a company isn't whether they make mistakes," Maya continued. "It's how they respond when those mistakes come to light. Do they deny? Do they make excuses? Or do they see it as an opportunity to become better?" As she spoke, Maya noticed several audience members nodding. Others were taking notes. A few looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing similar issues in their own businesses. "My experience taught me something powerful," she concluded. "Sometimes the most important changes begin with painful moments. Sometimes we need to see ourselves through different eyes before we can truly change. And sometimes the person who shows you where you're going wrong is the exact person you need to help you get it right." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was thunderous. Maya had touched a nerve, speaking truth that many had experienced but few had addressed. As she stepped away from the podium, Maya knew this was just the beginning. What had started as one humiliating day in a car showroom had grown into something that was changing an entire industry. And that was truly shocking.